Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guests are Mark Sawyer and Mike Stuart of Omico Mining Corp, who are a joint venture between Greenstone Resources LP and a private equity fund specialising in the mining and metals sector, and International Base Metals Limited, an Australian natural resources unlisted public company, and advancing their development of a copper asset in Namibia. Mark has a background in finance and law, and Mike's background is in geology. And we're going to talk about the history of the company, their recent release at BFS, obviously talk about the project and discuss what is happening in the market. So Mark and Mike, both welcome to the podcast. How are you both doing?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, great for you guys to come onto the show. As we always start the show, I wonder if individually, if you can just tell us a bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, how you got into the mining industry, how your career's developed to what it is today.
Okay, maybe I'll kick off, Mike, if that's all right with you. I guess I've been in mining now almost 30 years. As you said in the intro, I was originally a lawyer in London and in Australia. I joined Rio Tinto in the mid-90s, initially as a lawyer, and then moved into sort of various commercial roles, working on projects in Africa, North America, and elsewhere. And then sort of moved sideways into an investment banking role, specialising in the mining and metal space, particularly at the junior end, before then stepping 6 or 7 years later into a more senior role at Xstrata, where I was general manager and co-head of the group business development function. Yeah, that was during the last super cycle in the noughties, pretty exciting period of time. Xstrata grew very, very quickly during that period. It was actually during that period that I met my business partner. We were joint venture partners, in fact, on an iron ore project in West Africa, where Xstrata was the manager and majority owner. And we together decided to set Greenstone up in 2012, 2013. So we've been going for 11 or 12 years now. Both shared a vision that, there was a scarcity of capital, particularly for the junior end of the sector in pre-development assets, and set the company up with a strategy of identifying quality projects with a global mandate, pre-production, post-exploration, and assist those companies and leverage our own skill sets and our own networks to assist those companies in bringing those projects into production. And that's kind of what's been keeping us busy, I guess, over the last sort of 11 or 12 years.
And Mike?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a geologist by trade, graduated in the early 90s. I've spent most of my career in various parts of Africa. I'm starting in the Congo, Brazzaville in sort of about 1994. I then moved on to Tanzania, working in gold exploration. Then in the late 90s, I joined First Quantum. I was with them for 9 years, working on projects in Zambia and the DRC mainly. This included sort of the due diligence and First Quantum taking over Mopani copper mines in those days with Glencore. I was then the project geologist for the final resource drilling at Kansanshi, and took that through to the BFS and was the first chief geologist for the development of the Kansanshi deposit and first year or two of production. Still with First Quantum, I then moved on to Mauritania for the development and startup of the Glurba grain mine up there. I then moved back to the UK for a couple of years, worked in investment banking. I got bored of that and moved back to Namibia in 2010 as country manager for a junior Canadian company. We were doing a lot of copper base metals exploration in JV with Teck. Then in about 2013, I joined a company called Weatherly International, also in Namibia. And we were just doing the BFS and developing the Chudi copper mine, which was the first large-scale heap leach copper project in Namibia. I was the mining manager there to get that one started. And then I ran their sort of business development work, working on a couple of BFSs for underground lead zinc mines and looking at other opportunities in Southern Africa. In 2019, I moved back to the UK, where I'm based now. In 2020, I started working with Greenstone, or for Greenstone, on the Omitiomire copper project, which they had just picked up a JV with IBML, which was signed at the back end of 2019. So pretty much since then, been working on this project, getting it off the ground and getting the BFS completed.
Great. So I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the history of Omico Mining Corp, and obviously give us an overview of the projects that you've been working on.
Yeah, well, Mike, maybe you just want to talk to the history a little bit from discovery to I guess probably 2014, 15 when we first looked at it.
Yeah, the actual deposit, Omitiomire, has in Namibia. It's located about 140 k's northwest of Windhoek and 100 odd k's from the international airport, so well placed for Namibia. It was originally discovered in about the 1970s by a company called General Mining and Finance, also known as Genmin, probably because there's a river that runs through the deposit, and like a lot of things in Africa, they found copper showings along the riverbeds. In the 1990s, Anglo-American did quite a lot of work on the project, and then in the early 2000s, some Namibian geologists took it over and they drilled a few hundred meters into the project. And then in 2008, they got IBML, the Australian company, interested in the project, and they brought in about 2008. Between 2008 and about 2014, they drilled 85,000 meters of drilling into the deposit, so it's been well drilled. They did a couple of feasibility studies along the way. One was a sort of oxide feasibility study for the small oxide cap, and they also looked at doing a larger scale flotation. But at the time, and mid sort of 2010s, 11s, 12s, that it just didn't make sense at the current copper price environment. It was never big enough to do a large scale float plant. And so by 2014, IBML had pretty much sort of given up on the project. And then it was end of 2019 when Mark and the Greenstone guys came in and realized the potential.
Okay. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Mark.
No, look, I think Mike's covered it pretty well. The deposit's been known about for quite some time. Like a lot of deposits, it sometimes takes time and studies and engineering to make a project work. We'd looked at this originally actually back in, I want to say 2013, 2014, something like that, when the sort of previous management team were very much promoting this, as Mike said, as a conventional flotation project. It just lacked the scale and the grades to really support that sort of level of capital at that time, given the sort of depressed copper markets. And everyone listening to this will remember those dark days when copper was not quite in free fall, but was certainly at a very depressed level compared to where we are today. We, I guess, looked at it, as Mike said, again in 2019, went back into the data room and, we discovered, there was a very short document in that data room that was, in fact, the results of a bottle roll test, which was was not conclusive. But what it did do was highlight to us that before anyone went too far down any particular process route, it would be, I guess, sensible to look at, the amenability of this ore to leaching before too many big decisions were made. And none of that work had been done. And we see this time and time again. A lot of these projects were not the product of the last super cycle, but, back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, there was pressure from the market and the investors to make projects bigger and bigger and to develop them faster and faster. And corners were cut. A lot of money, as we know, looking back on those times, was wasted. And I think there was a missed opportunity, which was to look at this from an entirely different perspective. And that's kind of what we weren't interested in buying the project, but what we were prepared to do at that time was invest money in the ground and do the work to see whether or not the ore was amenable to leaching and whether an alternative process route could be pursued. And that's where we find ourselves, today, 4 years later, well, almost 5 years later, I think, Mike, where we are, and we've got a very exciting project on our hands, I think.
Yeah. Obviously, talking about the project, you're planning to use solvent extraction, electro-winning processing technology. I just wondered if you can just talk us through that process and what led you to that decision.
Yeah, well, I think the key thing with this project was when Greenstone recognized that this was amenable to what they call chloride heap leach, which is widely used in South America these days. So it's basically a traditional sort of acid heap leach, but at the very beginning stage, you add some salt. And this effectively oxidizes the mineralization, which in this case is all chalcocite. So once Greenstone recognized this, we've spent sort of best part of 4 years and 4 phases of metallurgical test work to optimize the chloride heap leach for this deposit, because these heap leaches tend to be quite sort of deposit specific on the recipe of how much salt and how much acid and crush size and all the other variables that needs to be done. So a lot of columns have been done, and we've come up with a recipe that's relatively low acid consumption and good recoveries and quick leach times compared to a lot of heap leach projects. And then basically at the back end, it runs through a traditional solvent extraction. The only difference there is we have to have an extra wash cycle to take the salt out of the system. And then it's in the EW. The capacity of the EW is up to 32,000 tons a year of pure copper cathode. And we average over the life of mine about 26,500 tons over a 15-year life of mine. So the key to this was recognizing that chloride heap leach, which is pretty common in South America, works. And Namibia has no shortage of salt. Namibia is a major salt exporter as well. So it ties it with the Namibian sourcing of salt as well.
Yeah. You recently published the BFS for the project just in November. I understand that you've done a lot of test work to optimize the numbers. How's this impacted the flow sheet?
I guess the biggest impact we've had from the original flow sheet was we managed to reduce our acid consumption. A couple of years ago, we were looking at acid consumption in the sort of 40 kilograms per ton. And we've managed to reduce that to 9 kilograms a ton. So that's significantly reduced our OPEX and CAPEX on the acid plants. And we've also reduced the leach cycle times from about 300 days to recover the copper, or to recover most of the copper. And we're now down to about 120 days to recover most of the copper. So 4 years of test work has reduced our acid consumption and cycle times, which obviously reduces our CapEx, OpEx, and the working capital that's tied up in the heap. So that's the main impact we've managed over the last 4 years.
Yeah. What sort of infrastructure is already in place, and also what needs to be built around the project?
Yeah, before you get into the specifics there, I think, Rob, it's probably worthwhile just broadening that question a little bit, because I think in this current market, and we've spent 11, 12 years looking for copper projects around the world, and there just aren't many good quality copper projects around the world. Yeah. And those that do exist sort of sit there at, I don't know, 2,000 meters or 3,000 meters high in the Andes, dare I say, in Central Africa, where there is just no infrastructure, or the infrastructure solutions are incredibly challenging. And I think that is one of the, not USP, because that's a sort of overworn expression, but one of the attributes of this project is its location, and related to that, the infrastructure solution. This is in Namibia, as we know, but don't underestimate though that Namibia is a very mining friendly, investor friendly environment. It's got a long track record of mining. So you're dealing with government and civil servants who are used to engaging and having ongoing dialogue with investors and mining investors. So you're talking the same language. and it's located. I mean, Mike can talk to the specifics because the obvious question we will always get asked is, well, what about water? Namibia is a hot, dry country, right? But it isn't just water. It's access to people. It's access to power. It's access to government, and it's and water. Obviously, that's an important ingredient here. But this is for me this is what makes this project particularly attractive. The economics speak for themselves. It's a good, solid project, but it's in a very, very good location. And it's, in my view, the execution risk here on building this project is low on a relative basis compared to a lot of other mining projects that we look at. It's very doable. And I think, against a backdrop of scarce project availability and I guess an increasing realization that, copper is a critical mineral, it puts us in a very strong position looking forward. But Mike, why don't you talk to, because I know you and the team have done a huge amount of work around water and power, but the whole raft of infrastructure issues. Maybe you could talk to those in a bit more detail.
Yeah, as Mark said, Namibia is a great jurisdiction for mining, and the skills are already there. Yeah, I guess power-wise, Namibia is pretty well endowed for power. There hasn't been any power cuts for a long time in Namibia. So we have to build about a 70-kilometer, 25 kVA power line, which is it's not a big deal in Namibia once you've got a servitude along the roads. Nam Power is very supportive of us to build, and because we start to open up another area of the country for their infrastructure, and we will provide at least 30% of the power will come from solar. So we will have a solar plant on site as well. We'll have about 30% of our total power consumption will be solar. On the water side, there's very little groundwater in the immediate area, which is a bonus for mining, but not such a good bonus for the processing side.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time doing pump testing and test work on a massive aquifer that's about 70 to 90 kilometers east of the project. In conjunction with the Department of Water Affairs and the Namibian hydrogeologists, we've proved up the aquifer. It's been exploited currently for a lot of farming and center pivots. And we've now proved up this aquifer and working with the various farmers to be able to get what we need from this aquifer, which is a fairly small amount compared to the farmers. The advantage of using heap leach over the previous ideas of using flotation was that it uses about a third of the water than previously. And we've got a lot of work that we've done on reducing the evaporation as well. So we think we've pretty much got water and power tied down. And we've worked hard with the farmers in the area to aquifer to get them on our side as far as developing the aquifer for the benefits of not just them, but for ourselves and Namibia.
Yeah. If you look a bit further out, is there any further exploration potential at the asset?
Yes, we do have an exploration license that surrounds our EPL, or our mining license, called the EPL. The mineralization at Omitiomire is sort of traditional Botswana and Zambian style dome mineralization. You get them on the edge of these gneissic domes. So similar to sort of Sandfire in Botswana. So Omitiomire sits on the eastern side of one of these domes, and we have the exploration license of about 300 square kilometers that covers the whole dome. There hasn't been a great deal of work done on the dome area. There's been soil sampling that does show up, copper soil sampling around the edge of the dome, but very little drilling or geophysics have been done for exploration potential. So there is exploration potential around the whole dome. We haven't focused on it in the last few years, and previously, nor did IBML particularly. It was always focusing on trying to get the project up and running. But yeah, there is some potential around the dome, and there are a couple of other domes not too far away as well. So there is potential there.
Yeah. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about the status of the permitting process at the moment?
Okay. One of the advantages of this project from the very beginning is that it already has a mining license. So the major number one license or permit is in place already, and that is valid till 2036. We, in the last couple of years, we've done a lot of the ESIA and the EMP work, We've completed the environmental and social impact assessment. We've done the scoping study. We've done a lot of public participation as required by Namibian regulations. And we have submitted the application for the environmental clearance to develop the project. That was submitted back in Q2. These things take a while to go through the Namibian system. But so far, there's been no red flags from the Environment Ministry on that. So we should expect, given now, we would expect hopefully sometime in Q1 next year, we would get the environmental clearance certificate for the construction and the mining.
But this is not in a sensitive area, Mike, is it? It's as you say, the number one permit we've got, the environmental. There are no environmental red flags here. Our local, we're not trying to move a town or a village. It's very sparsely populated. It affects a couple of farmers, who are incredibly supportive of the development. They've given us, access over the last few years to their land. We already have negotiated option agreements to buy the land when the development goes ahead. So you have that certainty there. A lot of projects, as you know, Rob, get delayed for a long, long time whilst you're negotiating with countless landowners, all of whom have got their own agendas, right? And some of whom don't want to move at all. So where all the building blocks here are in place to move quite quickly when we decide to pull the trigger on the development.
Yeah.
There is no one that lives on the farm where the deposit is, and that farm is owned by one farmer. And we have an agreement to buy his farm when we're ready.
Yeah. Obviously, as you described, it is an attractive project, which obviously has a lot of potential. Have you had a lot of interest across the industry on the project? And I wonder if you can just tell us what kind of interest you have had.
Yeah, look, I think we've had a lot of interest. I mean, I don't think that's going to come as any surprise to you or the listeners here, given it's in copper and given it's in Namibia. I think, for us, and that interest, almost stems back to when, we first got involved in the project, right? There were unsolicited inbound calls from various parties wanting to have a look at it, come to site, invest in it. And I guess we've spent the last 4 years trying to wrap our arms around it to understand what we've really got. And as you know, that takes time and money. It is probably taken us a bit longer than we'd expected, but, COVID managed to sort of drag that process out a bit, considering we sort of farmed into this at the end of 2019. It's taken us a few years to get here, but I'm pleased to say we've got here right now. As you know, given the scarcity of shovel-ready copper projects out there, there's a lot of interest in it right now, and that's something that obviously we can't ignore, and we're paying some attention to.
Yeah, certainly. And lastly, what's the outlook for sort of the next sort of 6 to 12, 18 months for the company and the project?
Yeah, look, I think it's an exciting time. All right, I guess, Mike and the team have worked their socks off on the BFS, over the last year or so. That's finally out there. Our partners are supportive and pleased with the results as well. So I think right now we've got to sort of take the project forward. We're currently at the stage where we're beginning to look at the sort of financing options here, strategic partners and the like. Undoubtedly, there would be, a small element of optimization as well, I'm sure, of the project as we go over the next sort of 12 months. But this is a project that will get built, right? I mean, I think that's the bottom line. This is a project that will get built. So the challenge for us as the manager and the majority shareholder here is to put the right structure in place, the right team in place, the right financing structure in place to move the project forward. And that's really, it's a bit, often people sort of think, well, you finished the BFS, right, let's get on with it now, build it. And life isn't as simple as that. This is a risky business, and our job now is to make sure we get all the right structure in place to put the project onto a strong footing and move forward. And that's currently what we're doing. So Mike probably thinks all the hard work's behind him, but it's not. Sorry to break the news on that, Mike. We can't
got to finance it and build it.
Yeah, exactly.
And any last words from you, Mike?
No, I'll just reiterate what Mark, it's a project that I think should be built, will be built, and it's in a jurisdiction where you can get things done in a fairly short order as well.
Yeah.
The nice thing about Namibia is there's not a lot of hierarchy in the ministries or anything else. You can go in and you can get things done.
Yeah. Mark and Mike, really appreciate your time. Thank you for giving us an overview of Omico Mining Company. Obviously, what an exciting project that you've got in store there. And obviously wish you well going into obviously 2025 and moving that project along. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to follow your story and the company, how can they go about doing that, and what sort of social media platform channels are you on?
Well, we obviously have a website, and we work closely with Tavistock on our outreach, in terms of engaging and getting news out there. And as and when we hit different milestones, Tavistock are doing a good job helping us socialize that information. But probably the website is probably the best. And most people in the industry will know how to get hold of Mike and myself if they want to talk to us personally. But, we're available. But the website is probably the first port of call.
Yeah, certainly. We'll include that in the show notes accompanying this for easy access. Any of our audience wants to obviously reach out to you guys, they can do that. So thank you for your time. Wish you all the luck for the next coming years, and good luck for the future.
Cheers, Rob. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Cheers, Mike.
Always. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episodes. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. Not just people within our mining industry, but people outside of our mining industry. Hope you've got a lot of value from that. What an exciting project and potential it does have. And hopefully you can share this message by sharing this podcast to others within our industry and outside of our industry. Until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.